Right. So, in the last video, we had talked about how stress can be a factor when we consider something like, the development of diseases. These can be diseases such as cancer. This can be something like cardiovascular disease. But stress does seem to have an impact on, what sort of diseases we develop or whether we develop them or not in the first place, right? Um, Now, what we see is that there are two different ways of coping with stress, right? Now, there is something that's called problem centered coping, and there's something that's called emotion centered coping. And we see how, stress management styles differ across the lifespan, and, how we middle aged adults are coping with their stress levels. What are they doing with the stress that they're experiencing in their lives? So, problem centered coping is something that, it sort of is made up of individuals appraising problems, right? And trying out solutions, so trying to work out solution. Whereas what you see is that emotion centered coping is sort of management of stress, when it's management of your own level of stress. It's sort of realizing perhaps that you cannot do much about a situation. um so yeah, so let's take an example. So let's say that we have an individual here, and this person is experiencing a lot of stress because of the coronavirus pandemic. Now, how would they engage in problem centered coping? So one of the things that they could do is that they read up reliable sources of information. So let's say WHO pages or the information that's disseminated by WHO. And what they realize is that they can limit their chances of contracting the virus by washing their hands, by limiting social contact, by not going out of the house. So this is what they do then, right? That they appraise the problem, and they try to work out a solution. That they try to stay at home, they try to not be outside. However, even though they do take this measure, what they could experience is something, they could still be experiencing stress. One reason for this stress could be that they're being asked to come for work, and they cannot say no because they might not end up losing their job. So they still, they cannot confine themselves to the house. So then what does Tim do with, what does this person do with all of the stress that they're experiencing because of the situation? And the situation is something that is out of their control. So then emotional centered coping sort of, helps them deal with the stress that they're experiencing. So, they could sort of rationalize the stress to themselves, or they could accept that this is a situation that they cannot change, and therefore they would stop being frustrated over over all of these different scenarios, or all of these different invading thoughts that they might have. So taking my own example, I'm at home, but I cannot control, for example, what my parents do. I can talk to them, I can try to reason with them, but if they still choose to go out and meet other people, that is something I cannot physically ask them to not leave the house. And even though this could be stressful for me, I have to have an emotion centered coping style to it, in which I learn to accept that there are certain things that are not in my control, and that I just need to sort of accept this reality and move on. So these are two different ways of coping with problems, right? What you see is that in middle-aged adults, you see this style, which is very much dominant, which is problem-centered coping. Even though this is not to say that emotion-centered coping is unhealthy, or is not a good way of sort of managing stress. However, perhaps because middle-aged adults feel a lot more in control of their lives, of let's say their careers, or because they've built up, probably according to the social clock, a family till now, so they feel a lot more in control, and that's could be one of the reasons that you see that this style of coping with stress is more prominent. Another thing that you see is that one sort of attribute or one quality that certain middle-aged adults seem to have is something that's called hardiness, that seems to be related with developing in an optimal manner during this stage of life. That could mean less stress, that could mean greater physical health. And what you see is that this quality, which is called hardiness, right, is made up of these three different constituents. So there's this sense of control, there is a particular commitment, and there is a challenge, right? Now let's take this example of online classes, right? Now a lot of people, a lot of faculty members as well, they are not too excited about doing online classes. It can pose to be challenging, definitely, for students and for faculty, because you need to sort of rethink, your pedagogy, and you need to rethink everything that you thought you knew about, the sort of assessments that you want to give out to students, to how can you make these classes more challenging, how can you make them fun, all of these different questions, right? But you have to sort of recognize, what you have control over and what you do not. So, for example, you might not have control over the situation, right? So you might not have control over, the situation that university colleges have to stay closed because there's a global pandemic, out there. But you do have control over certain things. So, for example, me as a faculty member, I could have control over how I design my lectures. I could have control over, the sort of assignments that I give out, right? So sort of recognizing what you have control over and having, this idea that you do have control over certain aspects, even if you do not have it over everything, right? So having this perception of control over certain areas of your life, right? Then having commitment. So in this example, when we're considering this example, we could think about it this way, that being committed, let's say, to going on with this course and trying to make it fun and trying to make it a learning opportunity for students, in which they're also sort of trying to rethink everything they knew about learning and about being students, right? And about what university could look like. And then there's another thing, which is challenge. So basically, yeah, so coming back to this, so people who are hardy, right, they have a certain level of commitment, just like they have a certain perception of control, right? When you talk about challenge, right, what you see is that people who are hardy, they tend to view different situations as challenges that they need to surpass, right? Now, when we consider this example of online classes, right, so we could also see this as a challenge in which, we are being sort of asked to rewire our pedagogies, and we are being asked to rethink everything we know about teaching. So this could be a challenge as well. And this could actually, sort of, when I think about it, it could really make things easier for students in the long run, in the sense that when you have this sort of experience of doing work online, it lets you have more power, really. So for example, if I'm recording these lectures, you can take them in your own time. You're no longer sort of you're no longer confined to the class timings. They're available to you whenever you want, and at your own ease, wherever you want to sit and listen to the recording or watch the video or whatever. So these are some. And what you see is that in middle age, individuals who have more of hardiness, right, they seem to be doing better in terms of physical health, in terms of emotional health, even in terms of cognitive health, right? What could be reasons for this? Now again, this could be two-sided, in the sense that individuals who are higher in SES, individuals who have had lesser health problems, right, it could go either way. So it could be that these individuals they are more hardy, or they do have more of hardiness, because they do experience more control over their life and their situation. But overall, even if we compare across SES, what we see is that individuals who are more hardy and who have, a generally, so when you are hardy, you have a generally a more optimistic view of life, right? So when you have that, you are less likely to have all of these um, negative effects or negative symptoms. You're less likely to report um, on the negative aspects of aging, right? So I think with this, we sort of conclude. There's one more thing that I want to discuss, which is something that, is called. So I want to discuss this other phenomena, which is basically called the double standard of aging, right? So what exactly do you think would be, we've touched on this earlier as well. It's basically that men and women are evaluated differently. So a middle-aged man is evaluated differently than a middle-aged woman. So when you see a middle-aged man, you might think that, he's more attractive, perhaps because he might have more power, he might be, financially more independent, and he might be he might be at a place in life in which he sort of understood or figured out career and family. However, with women, what you see is that a lot of negative connotations go with being middle-aged. It's What you see is that women and men tend to evaluate middle-aged women a lot more negatively than middle-aged men. So, this is a question that I want to leave you with, that, why do you think this could be? Right? And this is something that I'll put up a discussion post on this over Moodle as well, and we can talk about it there.